It's strange, isn't it? How you can live your whole life in the same four walls, and yet, one day, those walls stop feeling like home. Today, I want to share a story that has lived in my chest for years, one that reshaped not only my home but my heart. I hope you'll stay with me until the very end, because this isn't just a story about objects or money. It's about trust. It's about love that changes shape when you least expect it. If you enjoy hearing life stories from people who've been through more than their fair share of storms, you might consider subscribing. I share stories like these so they're not forgotten. But for now, let's begin. That day, my daughter walked into my house with eyes that didn't look like hers, and she walked out carrying my past. I didn't know it yet, but within hours, my living room shelves, my dresser drawers, even the box under my bed, all the places where my life had quietly gathered over decades, would be stripped bare, and I, left standing in a silence I still hear to this day. It started the week before. I'd been sitting in my armchair by the window, the one that's seen better days, but still holds me just right, mending the hem of an old kitchen towel. Outside, the late autumn sky hung low and heavy, the kind that makes you reach for a sweater even inside the house. I'd been thinking of my husband, gone 12 years now, and how he always brought me chrysanthemums this time of year. My fingers paused on the thread when I heard the creak of the gate. It was her, my only daughter, Anna. She used to come in smiling, even when she was tired from work, but lately, the smiles had been shorter. That afternoon, she didn't come with a story about her day or a joke to make me laugh. She came with a look I couldn't read, part worry, part something else. "Mom," she said, pulling off her coat without meeting my eyes. "We need to talk about all this stuff." She waved her hand toward the living room, my living room, as though the porcelain clock on the mantel, the embroidered table runner from my wedding, and the little glass swan from our first trip to the seaside were nothing but clutter. I remember sitting back, my needle paused in the air, thinking I must have misheard her. "All this what?" I asked. "This old junk," she said, frowning slightly, as if the word itself tasted bad in her mouth. "You don't need it, Mom. It's just taking up space." I laughed. I thought she was joking. "Anna, these are my things, our family's things." Her eyes flicked over the room again, but there was no recognition in them. No memory of the Christmas mornings we'd sat by that same porcelain clock, or the way she'd once begged me to let her play with the glass swan, holding it carefully between her tiny fingers. "You can't take it with you," she said flatly, shrugging. I felt something cold run through me then. It wasn't the words themselves. I'm not foolish enough to think I'll live forever. But the way she said them, as if the life behind those objects meant nothing. I didn't argue that day. I changed the subject, asked if she wanted tea, tried to find the old rhythm between us, but something in me stayed unsettled, like a picture hanging crooked on the wall. That night, I sat alone in the quiet, running my fingers over the carved wooden box that held my wedding ring, my husband's cufflinks, and a small folded letter he'd written me the week before he died. I thought about how I'd pass these on to her someday, believing she'd keep them safe, maybe even tell her children about them. I didn't know then that someday was coming much sooner, and not the way I'd imagined. 3 days later, she came again. The conversation started the same. Talk about tidying up, letting go of the past, simplifying. This time I tried to explain. I told her where each thing came from, who had given it, what it meant. She listened, or at least she pretended to, but her answers were short. That's nice, Mom, but it's still just stuff. If you're watching this, I want you to picture something for me. Imagine someone walking through your home and pointing to the life you've built. Birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, even quiet afternoons that only mattered to you, and calling it useless. Imagine them saying it with no malice, but no warmth either, just dismissal. It does something to you. It did something to me. And yet, I still didn't see the storm coming. On the morning it happened, I left for my usual walk to the corner store. My knees aren't what they used to be, so I take it slow, but I like to get out when the weather's decent. I stopped to chat with Mrs. O'Malley from down the street. She was showing me her new knitting project, and I was gone maybe 45 minutes. When I came back, the air in my house felt different. I stepped into the living room and saw it immediately. The mantel was bare. The shelves along the far wall, where my books and photo frames used to be, were empty. My chest tightened. I looked toward the hallway. The old cedar wardrobe door was open, and the carved box was gone. Before I could speak, Anna appeared from the kitchen, holding a half-empty cardboard box. "Mom," she said quickly, "I did you a favor. Got rid of all that clutter. You'll feel so much lighter now." I froze in the doorway, my voice barely a whisper. Where are my things?" She set the box down and shrugged. "I sold them. A man from the antique shop came by. Honestly, Mom, you should thank me. Most of it was just taking up space. Taking up space." I stood there, feeling the weight of empty shelves pressing in on me, and for a long moment I couldn't even find my breath. People think that grief is loud, that it's crying into your hands, shouting at the ceiling, throwing things until they shatter. But grief can be very, very quiet. It can be a silence so heavy that even the clock on the wall sounds afraid to tick. That was my house in the days after Anna sold my things. The rooms were too still, as if they themselves were holding their breath. At first, I told myself not to make a scene. She was my daughter. She must have had her reasons. Maybe the money was for something urgent, medical bills, rent, some emergency she couldn't bear to tell me about. Mothers will tell themselves anything if it means protecting the child they brought into this world, even if that child is grown and looking them in the eye as she dismantles their life. But when I asked her, her answers came wrapped in the same calm tone, as if she were explaining the weather. I just thought it was time to let go, Mom. You don't need all that stuff. It's not good to live in the past. The past. She said it like it was a weight I'd strapped to my own back, not the foundation beneath my feet. I kept picturing the things that were gone. The wedding china from 1968, not fancy, but each cup had a delicate gold rim that caught the light just so when we set the table for special occasions. I used to run my finger along those rims while waiting for the kettle to boil, a small habit my husband teased me about. Gone. The quilt my grandmother made the year I was born, stitched by hand under the glow of a single oil lamp. Each square was cut from old dresses and aprons, carrying the colours of a life lived before mine. I used to fold it neatly at the foot of my bed, even when I stopped using it because it had grown fragile with age. Gone. The small ceramic horse my father carved during the long winter of '54, when he couldn't work the fields. He'd painted it with such care, smoothing the glaze with his thumb until it gleamed. I kept it in the glass cabinet so the dust wouldn't dull it. Gone. And the wooden box. That one hurt most. My wedding ring, my husband's cufflinks, the letter he wrote from the hospital when he knew he wouldn't be coming home. The smell of cedar every time I lifted the lid. All of it. Gone. When I asked where they were, Anna just said, "It's all gone now, Mom. You'll see. It's better this way. The house feels bigger, doesn't it?" No, the house didn't feel bigger. It felt hollow. 2 days after it happened, I went to make tea and reach for my favourite mug, the one my sister bought me on our trip to the coast. It wasn't there. I checked the sink, the dish rack, the cupboard. Then I remembered. It had been sitting on the top shelf near the clock that was now gone. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. Losing things you've lived with for decades feels like losing pieces of yourself. If you're watching this right now, tell me, have you ever had someone take something from you that wasn't just a thing? Something that carried the weight of memory? Share it in the comments. I read every single one. Sometimes they're the only proof I have that I'm not alone in feeling this way. I started avoiding the living room because every glance at those bare shelves sent a sharp pang through me. I took to sitting in the kitchen, staring out at the back garden, where the roses my husband planted still bloomed despite my neglect. But even there, I felt the absence. I'd catch myself reaching for the little glass swan that used to sit on the windowsill and remember that it too had been taken. What hurt most wasn't the loss of the objects. It was what it meant. These weren't just things. They were proof of the life I'd lived, of the people I'd loved and lost, and my own daughter had decided they were worthless. That Sunday, Mrs. O'Malley stopped me in the street. "I saw Anna the other day," she said. "She had a man with her, tall, grey-haired, with a van. They loaded up quite a bit. You redecorating?" I forced a smile and said something vague about spring cleaning, even though the leaves in the gutter told a different season. But my mind was already racing. The next time Anna came over, I tried again. I told her I understood she might need money, that she could have just asked. I told her I would have given her anything except the memories I had left. She rolled her eyes, as if I were being dramatic. "Mom, you can't keep everything forever. It's just stuff." Just stuff. After she left, I sat in the living room for the first time in days. The late afternoon light came in low, catching the empty spaces where once there had been the shapes of my life. I tried to picture the room the way it had been, but my mind kept slipping, like a hand reaching for a railing that isn't there anymore. That night, I dreamed of the wooden box. In the dream, I was opening it again and again, only to find it empty. And somewhere, far away, I could hear Anna's voice saying, "It's just stuff, Mom," over and over, until I woke with the taste of salt on my lips and realized I'd been crying in my sleep. The next morning, I decided I had to find out where my things had gone. I didn't tell Anna I was going looking. Something in me knew that if I mentioned it, she'd either try to talk me out of it or find a way to make sure I came up empty-handed. So I waited until Tuesday morning, the day she usually worked a double shift, and set out on my own. The autumn air had a bite to it, the kind that seeps into your sleeves no matter how tightly you button your coat. My knees complained with every step, but I kept going, clutching my purse close, the way you do when you're carrying more than just money. Inside, I'd tucked a small photograph of the wooden box, taken years ago when I'd been organizing old family pictures. I hadn't known it then, but that snapshot would become my compass. The antique shop in town is a narrow, dim-lit place, its windows crowded with tarnished brass, dusty picture frames, and porcelain dolls whose glass eyes never seemed to blink. The little bell above the door jangled as I stepped in. A man emerged from behind the counter. He was tall and thin, with a face like folded parchment. His eyes flicked over me in that assessing way shopkeepers have when they're deciding whether you're a buyer or a seller. "Can I help you?" he asked. I set the photograph on the counter. "This was mine," I said. "A wooden cedar box, about this size. My daughter sold some things recently, and I was wondering if—" Before I could finish, he shook his head. "Ah, yes, I remember. Lovely piece, but I'm afraid it's gone." "Gone where?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. "Sold. Same day it came in, actually. Man from the city, big collector of personal heirlooms. Paid cash." He paused as if trying to soften the blow. "That box, it wasn't just sentimental. It was valuable. The craftsmanship alone." I cut him off. I don't care about the value. My throat tightened. I care about what was inside. He hesitated. There were some items, jewelry, papers. We don't usually keep those. They go with the piece when it's sold. I'm sorry. Sorry. Such a small word, pressed flat and empty between us. I turned to leave, but he called after me. If you're looking for the rest of it, the china set, the figurines, the clock, most of that went to the auction house 2 towns over. They'll have records. Auction house. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like they belonged to someone else's life. By the time I got home, my legs were shaking from more than just the walk. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the photograph still in my hand. The wooden box had been polished in that picture, the grain rich and warm. My husband's cufflinks had glinted faintly beside it. All of it, in the hands of strangers now. That evening, Anna called. Her voice was light, casual. Hey, Mom. Just checking in. How's the house feeling? Less cluttered, right? I didn't answer right away. I went to the antique shop, I said finally. There was a pause. Why would you do that? I wanted to know where my things were. Another pause. Then a sigh, the kind you give a child who won't stop asking questions. Mum, I told you, it's better this way. Those things were just sitting there collecting dust. Now they're with people who appreciate them. People who appreciate them. I bit down on the inside of my cheek so I wouldn't say what I was thinking. That the people who appreciated them were the ones who'd given them to me. The ones who were gone now. And that no amount of dust could erase the love sewn into every inch of those objects. After we hung up, I sat in the dim kitchen until the streetlights came on. I thought about calling her back, demanding she tell me exactly what she sold, for how much, and to whom. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed to be sure. The next morning, I took the bus to the auction house. It was a squat brick building with faded lettering above the door, the kind of place you'd pass without noticing if you weren't looking for it. Inside, rows of tables were cluttered with silverware sets, oil paintings, and glassware that caught the light in fractured rainbows. A woman at the front desk looked up as I approached. Can I help you? I told her my name, showed her the photograph, and explained that some of my possessions might have been brought in recently. She clicked through a database on her computer, her nails tapping lightly on the keys. She murmured. Yes, here we are. Lot for any 421, assorted antiques, including a porcelain clock, 12-piece china set, ceramic horse figurine. She kept reading, each word landing like a stone in my stomach. Sold last Thursday. Do you know who bought them? I'm afraid not, she said. All sales are final, and most of our buyers prefer to remain anonymous. I thanked her, though I'm not sure why. The ride home felt longer than the ride there, the bus engine a low, steady drone beneath my thoughts. When I stepped off at my stop, the air smelled of wood smoke and damp leaves. I stood there for a moment, looking up at my house, my hollow house, and realized that it wasn't just the objects that were gone, it was the trust. And once trust is gone, you can't buy it back. I waited 2 more days before calling her, not because I needed time to calm down, though I did, but because I wanted to see if she'd reach out first. She didn't. Not a text, not a phone call. Just silence, as if she thought the whole matter was settled. On Friday morning, I dialed her number. She answered on the third ring. "Hi, Mum," she said, her tone bright but thin, like a lampshade hiding a burnt-out bulb. "We need to talk," I said. "In person." She hesitated. "I'm busy today." "This weekend, then?" A sigh. "Fine. Sunday." When Sunday came, the sky was a dull slate, the kind of colour that makes the day feel shorter than it is. Anna arrived late, wearing sunglasses even though the sun hadn't shown its face all morning. She came in carrying a coffee from one of those expensive cafes I never go to. We sat in the kitchen. I didn't bother offering tea. "Anna," I began, "I went to the antique shop and the auction house." Her jaw tightened. "I told you, Mom." "No, you told me it was clutter. You told me you were helping me. What you didn't tell me is that you sold pieces of my life for cash." She took off her sunglasses and set them down on the table. Her eyes were tired, not the kind of tired you get from a long day, but the kind that seeps into your bones when you've been carrying something heavy for too long. "I needed the money," she said finally. The words dropped into the air between us like stones into a pond. "For what?" I asked, though a part of me already dreaded the answer. "Rent, bills, some debts." She looked down at her coffee. "Things got out of hand. I didn't want to ask you for help because I didn't want to feel like a failure." I sat back, my hands folded in my lap to keep them from trembling. "So instead, you took what wasn't yours to take." "They were just things, Mom. You can't take them with you." I leaned forward. "Do you have any idea what was in that box? Your father's cufflinks. The letter he wrote me before he died. That's not just stuff. That's the story of my life. Our life." She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with a flash of frustration. "You're acting like I threw it all in the trash. I didn't. I sold it to people who wanted it, people who'd take care of it." "Strangers," I said. "You sold it to strangers." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. Finally she said, "I'm sorry." The words were flat, drained of weight. "No," I said quietly. "You're not. Not yet." She stood, picking up her coffee. "I didn't come here to be lectured." "You came here because I asked you to," I reminded her. "Because you owe me more than an explanation. You owe me the truth." Her hand paused on the strap of her bag. "The truth is, I'm drowning, and I didn't know how else to keep my head above water." And there it was, the smallest crack in her armor. "If you'd just told me," I started, but she shook her head. "You'd have emptied your savings for me," she said, "and I couldn't live with that. This way, I thought, at least it's not your money. It's things you don't even use anymore. I felt my chest tighten. Things I don't use. Anna, you don't measure the value of a memory by how often you take it off the shelf. She looked at me then, and for a flicker of a moment, I thought I saw regret. But it was gone as quickly as it came. She put her sunglasses back on. I have to go, she said. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The coffee cup ring she'd left behind on the wood stared at me like a small dark bruise. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her walking out the door with that box under her arm. I thought about the man from the antique shop, the collector from the city, the anonymous bidders at the auction house. Somewhere out there, pieces of my life were scattered in rooms I'd never see, in hands that didn't know the stories behind them. And the person who should have cared most was the one who'd let them go. The days after our conversation felt longer than they should have. It's strange how time changes when your house loses its heartbeat. Before, the hours had been filled with small rituals. Dusting the shelves, polishing the clock, straightening the books, running my fingers over the quilt at the foot of the bed just to feel its softness. Now, those moments were gone, and the spaces they left behind seemed to stretch endlessly. I found myself talking out loud more than usual. Not to anyone, of course, just to the air, to the empty spaces where my things had been. It was habit, I suppose. I used to tell the wooden horse good morning when I passed it on the way to the kitchen. I'd hum to myself while I arranged the china, careful not to chip the delicate gold rims. Without them, my hands didn't know where to rest. One evening, I sat at the table with a cup of tea that had gone cold before I'd even taken a sip. The steam curled upward in thin, tired ribbons. My gaze drifted to the wall where the porcelain clock had hung. I could still see the faint circle it had left behind, lighter than the rest of the paint. A ghost of what used to be. It made me think of my husband. He'd bought that clock on a whim one winter when we'd gone into town to get firewood. Something to make the place look alive, he'd said, grinning as he handed it to me. I remember teasing him. Alive? It just ticks. But secretly, I loved it. The steady sound had been our constant, even during the worst storms. Now there was only silence. I went to the wardrobe that night, reaching instinctively for the cedar box before remembering it wasn't there. My hands hovered over the empty space, fingers twitching with the memory of its smooth surface. I sat down on the edge of the bed and let the weight of it all sink into me. I thought about the letter my husband had left inside. I'd read it so many times over the years that I could recite parts of it, but the ink, the curve of his handwriting, those were irreplaceable. It wasn't just the words, it was his hand that had formed them, his last thoughts pressed into the paper for me to keep. And now, some stranger might toss it aside without even reading it. The thought made my chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with age. I know some of you watching this might think, they're just things, you still have your memories. And you're right, but the truth is, memories fade. They slip away no matter how hard you try to hold on to them. The objects, they help anchor them. They're reminders, proof that what you lived was real. If you've ever lost something that held more meaning than words can explain, I want to hear from you. Leave me a comment telling me what it was and why it mattered. Maybe it was a photograph, a piece of jewelry, a note from someone you loved. Share it. Because when we tell those stories, we keep them alive. And right now, I need to know that I'm not alone in this. The days bled into each other after that. I'd wake in the morning with a heaviness that seemed to press me deeper into the mattress. I cooked less, talked less, moved less. My neighbour, Mrs. O'Malley, knocked one afternoon with a basket of fresh rolls. "Haven't seen you out much," she said, her voice gentle. I just nodded and thanked her, not trusting myself to speak without breaking. That night, I dreamed again of the cedar box, but this time, when I opened it, the inside wasn't empty. It was filled with photographs of my daughter, Anna, as a baby in her crib, as a little girl with her hair in pigtails, as a teenager blowing out birthday candles. One by one, the photographs lifted into the air, turning to ash before they hit the floor. I woke with my pillow damp and my hands clenched into fists. It wasn't just about the loss anymore. It was about what it said about us, about her. That she could look at my life, at the things that shaped who I am, and see nothing but junk. That she could take without asking, without even understanding what she was taking. And perhaps worst of all, that I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. It was a Thursday when I finally decided sitting here doing nothing was no longer an option. I'd been staring at the empty shelf in the living room for so long that my eyes had begun to play tricks on me, filling the space with shadows shaped like the things that used to be there. I could almost see the porcelain clock again, almost hear its ticking, almost. I put on my coat, slipped the photograph of the cedar box back into my purse, and walked to the bus stop. My knees protested with every step, but the ache in my legs was nothing compared to the one in my chest. The bus ride took me past streets I hadn't seen in years. New shops had sprung up, old ones had vanished. But my destination was still there. A small, musty pawn shop, tucked between a laundromat and a closed-down bakery. I'd heard from Mrs. O'Malley that a man in a van had been seen dropping things there. Inside, the air smelled of metal and dust. Behind the counter, a man with a thick beard and tired eyes looked up from a newspaper. "Help you with something?" he asked. I showed him the photograph. "I'm looking for this, or anything like it. My daughter might have brought it in." He studied the picture for a moment, then shook his head. "Not here, but I've seen something like it come through, a few weeks back. Went fast, Real cedar, handcrafted, didn't stick around long enough for me to remember who bought it. Do you keep records? I asked. He shrugged. Only for big ticket items, and even then, names don't mean much. Buyers use middlemen, aliases. You know how it is. No, I didn't know how it was. All I knew was that the things that once filled my home were now scattered across the city, maybe even further. On my way out, I noticed a shelf near the door. Mismatched items stacked together, half forgotten. My eyes caught on something small and familiar, a chipped mug with a faded blue rim. My mug, the one my sister had given me on our trip to the coast. I picked it up, cradling it in my hands. How much? He named a price, more than it was worth, objectively speaking, but I didn't argue. I handed over the cash and walked out with the mug wrapped in newspaper, holding it like a piece of treasure. It was such a small thing, but when I placed it back on my kitchen shelf, it felt like a spark of warmth in a cold room. One thing returned, one thing that still remembered me. That night, I called Anna. I found my mug today, I said. Silence. Then, Mom, No, I cut her off. You don't get to tell me it's just stuff. Not anymore. That mug sat on my table every morning for 30 years. And you sold it for what? A handful of bills that are probably already gone? Her voice was quieter when she answered. I told you, I needed the money. For what exactly? I asked, my tone sharp. She hesitated. Some overdue bills, and other things. What things? When she finally spoke, the words came out in a rush. Credit cards, payday loans. I got in over my head, Mom. I thought I could fix it myself, but it just kept getting worse. I was behind on rent and I panicked. I closed my eyes. So you took from me, without asking. I didn't want to worry you, she said, almost pleading now. You've done enough for me already. I thought if I just cleared the debt, I could start fresh. I didn't think. No, I interrupted. You didn't think. Or maybe you did, and you decided your fresh start was worth more than my memories. The line went quiet. I could hear her breathing, fast and uneven. I'm sorry, she whispered. It should have felt like something. A step toward mending the tear between us. But it didn't. Not when the shelves were still bare. Not when I knew the cedar box was sitting in some stranger's home, and my husband's letter was somewhere I'd never see it again. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, the mug in front of me. It wasn't much, but it was proof that not everything was gone. And maybe, just maybe, if I kept looking, I could bring a few more pieces home. But I also knew something else now. My daughter's life was teetering on the edge of collapse. And no matter how much she'd hurt me, she was still my child. Which meant the next step would be the hardest one yet. Deciding whether to help her again, knowing what she'd already taken. I didn't sleep that night. The mug sat on the kitchen table like a witness, watching me wrestle with the choice I didn't want to make. My daughter had taken from me, not just things, but trust, memories, pieces of my heart. And yet, here she was, drowning in a sea of debt, and I was the only one who might be able to throw her a rope. But at what cost? I boiled water for tea, though I didn't drink it. My hands kept drifting to the mug, tracing the chipped rim with my thumb. One small victory in a war I hadn't chosen to fight. By morning, I'd decided I couldn't just sit here guessing. I needed to see exactly what kind of trouble she was in. I called Anna and told her to come over. She sounded wary, but she agreed. When she arrived, she stood in the doorway like she was bracing for an attack. "Sit," I said, pointing to the kitchen chair. She sat. "Show me," I told her. "All of it. Every bill, every notice, every debt you owe." She tried to argue. "It's my problem, not yours." But I didn't let her. I'd raised her. I knew when she was hiding something. Eventually, she opened her bag and pulled out a folder, thick with crumpled papers. I went through them one by one. Credit card statements with balances higher than some people's yearly rent. Payday loan receipts with interest rates so obscene it made my stomach turn. Past due notices for utilities, final warnings from her landlord. "How did it get this bad?" I asked. She shrugged, her eyes fixed on the floor. I kept thinking I'd catch up. I took out one loan to pay off another, used the cards to cover bills, and then it just snowballed. And selling my things was, "What? Your final plan?" Her voice cracked. "I didn't know what else to do, Mom. I didn't want to ask you for money again." I closed the folder and sat back. "Anna, you didn't ask. You took. There's a difference." She flinched at that, and for a moment I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who'd come running to me with scraped knees, trusting I could fix anything. But this wasn't a scraped knee. This was a fracture running through the foundation of who we were to each other. "I can't replace what you sold," I said quietly. "Even if I found every piece, it wouldn't be the same. You understand that, don't you?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. "I don't know yet if I can forgive you," I continued. "But I do know this. You can't keep living like this. The debts, the lies, they'll eat you alive." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "So what do I do?" I stared at her for a long moment. The answer was obvious, but giving it would cost me more than I was sure I was willing to pay. "You need to face what you owe," I said, "and you need to do it without selling pieces of your family to strangers." Her voice was small. "I can't do it alone." And there it was, the truth I'd been waiting for. I reached for the mug, holding it between us. "I got this back," I said. "One thing. It's not much, but it's something. Maybe we can get more. But it's going to take work. And it's going to take honesty. If you can't give me that, I can't help you." She nodded again, this time with more determination. We talked for hours after that. She told me about the rent she owed, the landlord threatening eviction, the credit cards she hadn't paid in months. I told her about the auction house records, the antique dealer, the possibility, slim as it was, of tracking down some of the things she'd sold. By the time she left, there was no grand reconciliation, no hugging in the doorway like a scene from a movie. But there was a plan, and maybe, just maybe, the first crack in the wall between us was beginning to close. Still, as I watched her walk down the street, I knew this was far from over. The debts were big, the things she'd sold were scattered, and trust would take the longest to rebuild. The following week, we started our search. Not for the debts, those would come later, but for the pieces of my life scattered across pawn shops, antique dealers, and the homes of strangers. Anna arrived on Monday morning, hair pulled back, no makeup, a notebook in her hand. She'd printed a list of everything she could remember selling. Some of the descriptions were vague. Old china set, carved wooden horse, glass bird. But I filled in the gaps, writing down the details that mattered. The chips in the rim, the worn spots from years of handling, the little imperfections that made them mine. We started with the antique shop I'd visited before. The owner didn't seem pleased to see me again, but when I explained that we were looking for personal items, his expression softened, just slightly. Things move fast, he said, glancing at Anna. You won't get everything back, might not get anything, but I'll keep an eye out. From there, we went to the pawn shop where I'd found my mug. The bearded man recognized me immediately. Back again? This time with my daughter, I said. Anna shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. She didn't say much while I explained our search, but I noticed her eyes wandering over the shelves, lingering on certain items. On our way out, she stopped. That's the lamp, she whispered. I followed her gaze. On a lower shelf, half hidden behind a stack of mismatched plates, was a small brass lamp with a green glass shade, the one my husband had used on his desk when he wrote letters late into the night. My breath caught. The man named a price. It wasn't cheap, but I didn't care. I handed over the cash without hesitation, and when we carried it out, I felt a strange mix of joy and sadness. Joy that it was back where it belonged. Sadness that it had ever been gone. In the car, Anna stared at the lamp in her lap. I didn't think I'd ever see this again, she said quietly. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure yet if she meant it as an apology or just an observation. We spent the next 2 days combing through second-hand stores and flea markets. We found nothing, but each place we visited felt like turning over a stone. Sometimes there was nothing underneath. Sometimes there was something you wished you hadn't seen. On Wednesday, we tried the auction house again. The woman at the desk remembered me and agreed to let us look through more detailed records. You didn't hear it from me, she said, lowering her voice, but the man who bought that cedar box, he's a regular, collector from the city, name's William Grant, doesn't usually sell back what he buys. Anna wrote it down. We could call him, she suggested. I shook my head. No, this isn't something you handle over the phone. If we're going to ask for it back, we need to go in person. Her eyes widened. You'd go to him? To his house? I met her gaze. If it means getting your father's letter back, yes. The next morning, she tried to talk me out of it. What if he says no? What if he won't even see us? Then I'll know I tried, I said, and that's more than doing nothing. We didn't go that day. I needed to prepare myself. But something had shifted between us. For the first time since this began, Anna seemed to understand what these things meant to me. She asked questions. Where did you get this? Who gave you that? And I answered them all, even the ones that made my voice catch in my throat. That night, as I placed the lamp on the table beside my armchair, I noticed Anna watching me. You really love these things, she said softly. I didn't correct her. I didn't tell her it wasn't love for the things, but for the lives they represented. Maybe she wasn't ready to hear that yet. But as I sat there, the green glow of the lamp washing over the room, I allowed myself a small, fragile hope that maybe we could bring more of them home, and maybe, in the process, bring a piece of us back too. We waited until Saturday to make the trip. Anna had found an address for William Grant, the collector who'd bought my cedar box. He lived nearly 2 hours away, in a part of the city where the houses were large and the fences tall. I packed the photograph of the box, along with a small envelope of cash, not enough to compete with whatever he'd paid, but all I could spare without dipping into the emergency money I kept hidden. The drive was quiet. Anna gripped the steering wheel like it might slip from her hands, her knuckles pale. I stared out the window, rehearsing what I would say. When we finally pulled up, the house was even larger than I'd imagined. A wrought iron gate guarded the driveway, and beyond it, a manicured lawn stretched up to a white brick mansion with wide steps and black shutters. Anna pressed the intercom button. A man's voice crackled through. Yes? I cleared my throat. My name is Margaret Lewis. I believe you purchased a cedar box from the Hamilton auction house last month. It belonged to me. I'd like to speak with you about it. There was a pause and I thought he might hang up. But then the gate began to swing open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polish and something floral. The man who met us in the foyer was tall, with silver hair and sharp eyes. He studied me for a long moment before speaking. You must be the woman from the auction house records, he said. Yes, I replied, my voice steady despite the tightness in my chest. That box, it's not just an antique. It belonged to my late husband. There were things inside that can't be replaced. He nodded slowly. I know the kind of sentiment that comes with pieces like that. It's why I collect them. Then you understand why I'm here, I said. I'd like to buy it back. I slid the envelope across the small table between us. He didn't touch it. I'm afraid it's not for sale. My stomach dropped. Please, I'll give whatever I can. It doesn't have to be today, but it's not about the money, he interrupted. When I acquire something, it becomes part of my collection. I take care of it, preserve it. That box is safe with me. Safe. The word burned in my ears. Safe didn't mean home. Mr. Grant, I said, forcing myself to keep my voice calm. Inside that box was a letter my husband wrote me before he passed. His cufflinks. Those aren't just heirlooms. They're part of my life. I'm asking you, from one human being to another, to let me have them back. For the first time, his expression softened. A letter, you say? Yes, I whispered. Please. He stood, disappearing into another room. When he returned, the cedar box was in his hands. My breath caught at the sight of it. The grain of the wood, the slight scratch near the clasp. It was exactly as I remembered. I can't part with the box, he said, but the contents, those belong to you. He opened it and began to remove the items. My husband's cufflinks, wrapped in the same bit of cloth I'd used for decades. The folded letter, edges worn from my fingertips. A small photograph of us on our wedding day. My hands trembled as I took them. Thank you, I whispered, and for a moment I thought I might cry, right there in his pristine foyer. You take care of those, he said. And if you ever change your mind about the box, you know where to find me. The drive home was quieter than the drive there, but it was a different kind of quiet. I held the letter in my lap the whole way, tracing the crease with my fingers. When we got back, I placed the cufflinks in the top drawer of my dresser, the photograph in a frame on the mantel, and the letter in the small drawer of my bedside table, where it had always belonged. It wasn't everything, but it was something, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like a part of me had come home. The next morning, I woke before the sun. The letter was still in the drawer beside my bed, and I reached for it the moment I opened my eyes. My husband's handwriting was just as I remembered. The careful loops, the slight tilt to the right, the faint smudge where his pen must have hesitated. I read it slowly, letting each word settle into me like warm tea on a cold day. It wasn't a long letter, but it carried years of love in every line. He'd written about the life we'd built, the home we'd made, and his wish that I keep going, even without him. Don't let the world take away what makes you you, he'd written. Those words struck me harder now than they had back then. In the kitchen, the brass lamp we'd recovered from the pawn shop sat beside my armchair, its green glow soft against the morning shadows. The mug was back on the shelf where it belonged, and the cufflinks. I'd tucked them in the top drawer of my dresser, right next to the wedding ring I no longer wore but could never part with. Pieces, just pieces, but together they were enough to remind me that not everything had been lost. Anna came by that afternoon. She didn't bring coffee this time. Instead, she carried a small cardboard box. I went to another shop this morning, she said, setting it on the table. They had this, I'm not sure if it's yours, but I opened the box and stared. Inside was the glass swan that used to sit on the kitchen windowsill. Its surface was dusty, the tip of one wing chipped, but it was unmistakable. I reached in and held it up to the light. Even with the chip, it caught the sun just the way it always had, scattering tiny rainbows across the table. "Where did you find it?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "A place near the bus station. I remembered you used to say it made the kitchen feel brighter." For a long moment I just looked at her, not as the woman who had taken from me, but as the little girl who used to press her nose against that same window, pointing out birds in the garden. "Thank you," I said quietly. We didn't talk much after that. We just sat in the kitchen, the swan between us, the lamp glowing softly in the other room. When she left, I walked her to the door. She paused on the step. "I know I can't fix what I did overnight," she said, "but I want to try." And for the first time, I believed her. That night, I placed the swan back on the windowsill. It looked a little out of place at first, surrounded by the emptiness where other things used to be. But it didn't matter. It was home now, and so was I. If you've listened this far, I want to know, have you ever had to fight to get something back that was taken from you? Not just a thing, but a part of yourself. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what you fought to recover. I read every single one, and your stories keep me going more than you'll ever know. And to those of you who think it's just stuff, maybe you're right for your own life. But for some of us, those pieces are the threads that hold our stories together. When they're gone, the fabric frays. And if we're lucky, we can stitch it back, one piece at a time.